Welcome to this Aztlander presentation, A Tale of Three Caves, the cultural history of ancient Maya cave use in Belize, with Holley Moyes, University of California at Merced. Take it away.
Okay, Jim, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And I've seen some of my illustrious colleagues in the audience, and thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate the support, and that you're taking an interest in this work. So this talk is essentially a culmination of about 30 years of work that I've done in Belize and how I'm starting to think about it as a whole. My interest is obviously I'm a speleoarchaeologist. I work almost entirely in caves, not quite, but much of my work has been in caves. I'm very interested in my religion. And in religion in general, and especially like what can we glean from the archaeological record about people's religion and what they're thinking, what their ideologies are. So I examine sacred space. I look at persistent places and placemaking, the use of space, and the function and meaning of architecture. So I've done a lot of work on cave architecture, and maybe that's for another time. But tonight we're going to be talking about some of the work that I've been doing with the cave projects in Belize. It's been about 30 years now, like I said. And so, what we've been doing is we've been going around to caves and hopefully finding the very best ones that we can do the most research on, try to preserve them digitally, and train other people to map and to also preserve the caves. I don't know if you're aware, but the caves in Belize are being looted at a very rapid rate at this point. We're losing data very quickly. I've been doing a project just recently where I've been going back to the caves that I saw 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and I've been doing 3D models of these caves using LiDAR. But it's so depressing and disturbing to see what's happened to them since I recorded them. And I'm just so glad that we were able to do this work when we were, and that we were able to do so much. So I've had a wonderful team of people working with me, and I just want to acknowledge them first before we move on. This is Don Antonio Mai in the front, Nick Bourgeois, Aaron Ray, who's a student now at Albuquerque, and also Mark Robinson, who's now at Exeter. He's a professor there. They have been stalwarts with me, as well as so many students. I think literally hundreds of students have come through our project. And so, we do a lot of mapping. We were doing hand mapping for a long time. We got a Disto-X, which is a great tool, which almost works like a little total station. We've been able to use that recently, which has really made things faster and more accurate. But we have hand mapped all these caves. We've done about 32 caves now all together. And this is what we do in the caves. So we're literally sitting inside the caves and recording all the artifacts. Particularly, there's so many ceramics. That's our number one artifact class. So we sit there and we do all the work in the cave, and we leave everything there. And part of it is a belief that I have that these were sacred objects for the ancient Maya. They were votive offerings, and I think they should be left where they are. So that's the ideological reason, but there's also a practical reason, is that there is so much material in caves. If you were to take it all out, like, where would you store it? What would you do with it? I think it's better to leave it as a living museum. And if it gets looted, then that's tragic, but at the same time, I don't think taking it out is the right thing either. When we have really fine objects, so if you have beautiful polychrome, something like that, those get removed because we know they would disappear immediately. Any kind of jade objects, but if it's things like potsherds and lithic material and different things that would really not be very valuable on an art market or on a market of any kind, we try to leave all that there. So we've tried to tread lightly within these sites. So what we do is we literally point plot every single sherd in the cave, whether it's diagnostic or not, and many are non-diagnostic. And then I'm able to plot those onto a GIS, and I'm able to see artifact distributions. And a lot of my early work was about looking at artifact distributions in caves. And so that's sort of where this came from. But we really do try to record every single thing that's there. We take photographs. We try to do some radiocarbon dates. When it's appropriate, we do some excavations. So we're trying to record each of these sites just as thoroughly as we possibly can. And that's where my data that you're going to see today is coming from. Things don't always go so well. We have a lot of difficulties. We've had our field season cut short because of hurricanes. You know, we're working in these places where it's awfully muddy sometimes, and we get stuck. That's Shane Montgomery there in this picture. He's also someone. He's a student who's been working with me for a long time. He's Catherine Reese Taylor's student now, up in Canada, but we continue to work together. And you know, we ended up getting a little bit muddy sometimes, and so we are all people who really like to get dirty. So we are absolutely the dirty side of caving. I want to acknowledge Gonzo Pleites, who has worked with me for many years now, and I almost just don't want to even work without him. He's become such a major part of my project. Don Antonio Maya is another person who's worked with me for many years, from San Antonio Village, and he's my number one best bodyguard and caver, and I don't like to go to caves without him. I've also been working with the Cave and Cars team from the Friends of Conservation and Development, and they work with me out in the Chicky Bowl, and we've done quite a lot of work together, and I've taught them to map, and they're actually making very good maps. I'm very pleased with that partnership and how that's worked out. And then these are the people who've been very important to me. Barbara Voorhees, who many of you know, Barbara, I'm sure, has worked with me doing excavations both in the cave and in the surface site. She did my excavations at Las Cuevas for me. And Laura Kozakowski, we could not do without Laura. Laura is our beloved ceramicist. She has just been so giving and of her time and her work and her expertise. And Laura, you know, all my ceramics go through Laura. I don't publish anything without Laura having vetted them. And that's also a younger version of me, without gray hair, which when I looked at that, I was like, I didn't know I had gray hair. I had all this gray hair now. Holy cow. And of course, Jaime Aui. And I have to acknowledge Jaime because Jaime has single-handedly done more to promote cave archaeology in Belize than any single person. He's worked tirelessly over the years. I worked with him for many years. I trained with him early on, starting at Acton Tunachil McNall in 1996, which was the first cave I ever recorded. And he has stood by me and been my mentor and my supporter for so many years. And he's just done so much for the archaeology of Belize in general, but especially of caves. And so thank you, Jaime. Special gratitude. So there have been 3 major findings in caves. I used to say there was 2. I've upped it to 3. And part of this is because I think we need to acknowledge that caves were not just sacred spaces. They're certainly related to all kinds of different sorts of rights, but particularly agricultural success and rain control. And also they have political implications. And I think Barbara McLeod's work really does bring that home for us, where she's looked at the epigraphy at Noctunich, and she can see clearly that they're making political alliances and that the cave at Noctunich has been an important political place. And I don't think it's the only one. I think all caves have these political overtones because they are power places, and because rulers or community leaders can co-opt the power of the deities of the caves in order to pray for rain and do a lot of other things. They are definitely multi-purpose sites, but I think the agricultural success is a major finding that we have, and that I think all of them in some level are used for that. And then here's a picture of the El Rey Monument, just to for those of you, I'm sure everyone's seen this. I'm sure you all know the data, but I'll just run through it very quickly about how we know what we know about caves and how we know that they're related to rain. And so we start out fairly early on with this El Rey Monument, and it's a great monument. This is the drawing that Kent Riley did. and I really go by a lot of his interpretations for this, but it's great. So you can see the cave symbol here, and you can see that it's turned on its side. So you're seeing kind of a side view. There's a person sitting in there. They're wearing a big hat. There's been some discussion of whether that's a man or a woman. They're holding a cloud scroll. They're sitting on a cloud scroll, and there's this mist or clouds, or perhaps even speech scrolls that's coming out of the cave itself, suggesting that this person is doing an important ritual in the cave. And you can see from above that it's raining and that there's things growing. So we have this great nexus of some important person doing rituals and this in the cave, and rain rituals, agricultural rituals going on. And so we have this nexus of cave rituals really early on. The other thing is, ethnographically, Evan Vogt's written about this, that when you ask, or some indigenous people, where do clouds come from? They say, oh, they come from the mountains, they come from caves. And of course, that's what it looks like. And indeed, it is true. They do come from caves. This is the site of Las Cuevas that has a very large entrance. One day, I think it was around 2017, it was the solstice that day. I've been working in the cave all day, and I started out about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I noticed it was like it was foggy inside of the cave, and I thought, well, this is odd. What's going on? And as I walked out of the cave and looked back, I realized the cave was producing a cloud. So I said, run, get the camera. This is really amazing, because clouds really do come out of caves. And so I love it that so much of the Maya iconography and Maya thought, it's so very literal, and it really is coming from nature itself. And of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with the San Bartolo murals, where we have this wonderful image of a cave with a big speleothem fang, and there's a woman, and she's handing out corn tamales. This is Carl Tauba's interpretation. I think it's a good one. So she's handing out tamales and handing out water to an early version of the maize god. He's looking very kind of Olmec-y, but it's Carl has identified this person as a maize god, and he's handing it to a supplicant. So we see primordial food, primordial water being handed out of the cave itself, and all kinds of things happening on top of the cave. But I think it just reinforces this whole idea that sustenance is something that comes out of caves, and so they're related in ways to this. And of course, we know that Chaac, the rain god, lives in his cave. I've seen most of the images of Chaac. It looks like he's standing sort of in the front of the cave, so he's not way in the back, but he's pontificating. He's also sitting in his cave house. This is a wonderful photograph that Ian Graham took at La Polita on the right, and it's a life-size version of Chaac sitting on his throne inside of a cave. I don't know how you could get any better than that. But so that's another belief, is that rain deities live in caves. So we have the maize god associated with caves. We know that from the Popol Vuh. We also know rain deities associated with caves. So again, back to this idea of fertility and caves. So now we all know that they practice slash and burn farming. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. I'm sure all of you have been to the Maya area, have seen farms in different stages of growth. So we know that they burn, and then they plant, and then there's another thing that has to happen before everything comes up, and that is that you have to pray for rain. So you pray for rain, and it rains, and then you get corn, and it's all good. And so as long as that's working, everything's fine. And literally the only way to make it rain is to pray for rain. And that's true the world over. Cloud seeding doesn't work. I can tell you in California, it's never worked. You have to have clouds in order to be able to do it. And then you don't even know where it's going to rain. It's very unpredictable. So there is really no other way to make it rain than to pray. And so these are photographs. Some of them are ones that I took. Some of them are from the Associated Press. But all up and down the California highway, when we were having our drought, there were big signs that said, pray for rain. And when it finally rained, they had signs that said, thank you, Lord. So this is how you get it to rain. And it's still how you get it to rain today. This is a ceremony that Stephen Alvarez took. It's I think it's one of their early planting ceremonies in Noctunish If I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. So that's an early ceremony right there. So when we think about this, I'm going to now put this in the context of what we know from the caves in Belize that I've been working. And these are three of the major caves. So these are the biggest ones with the most well preserved. Well, in some cases, Chichimha and Actunchunichil, these were highly well preserved. Cave at Las Cuevas, not as well preserved, but it had subsurface deposits that were quite well preserved. So it's what I've learned about caves from these three caves. What have they taught me? And so the Chichimha cave has taught me about the importance of water and how caves were used to pray for rain during a very tumultuous time. Actunchunichil, again, agricultural rituals, but also how they intensified cave rites during that time. And at Las Cuevas, we see a different kind of intensification where we see pilgrimage and public rites being done there. So I'm just going to launch in and talk about them a little bit. So Chichimha Cave is the first cave I want to deal with because it's the first one. It's where we actually figured out a lot about cave use in Belize, and maybe further afield, but certainly I can say for Belize. And so one of the reasons is that I spent so much time in this cave. So this was a cave that Jaime Awi was doing under his auspices for a cave project that he had started in 1996, where he started out with Octantunishio McNall, and then he had other caves he was doing. And he asked a graduate student, does anybody want to do Chichimha Cave? And nobody wanted to do it. So I thought, well, I'm going to go out there and look at it. When I saw it, I was like, this is a wonderful cave. They didn't want to do it because it had been opened for tourism, but I thought, that's okay. These people who have opened it for tourism have done a wonderful job at curating it, and I think this would be a really, really interesting cave to work on for my dissertation project. So that's when I started working at Chichimha. So one of the things that they had done was they had blocked off the entrance with a gate, and which was really, I think, necessary at the time. So the way this cave was discovered was that their son William was out hunting one night, and if you ever want to go discover a cave, the way you do it is you go out with a dog hunting, and you will discover a cave. And that's exactly what happened. So his dog disappeared, chasing a gibnut into a cave, and he followed the dog in, and of course he had his flashlight because it was at night, and he started looking around and realized, oh, it's full of artifacts. There's all these things in here. And so he went back out, and the next day he came back with his father, and they explored the cave and looked at it and said, wow, this is great. And they were visionaries because they said, you know what, rather than taking this stuff out of the cave, why don't we leave it there and we'll make it a tourist site and we'll show it to tourists. And then people can appreciate it and we'll make money off tourism, which is exactly what they did. So they cleared out the front of the cave. This was completely blocked except for the small hole that the dog and William ran through. But the Maya themselves had blocked this cave off completely. And so they gated the cave, which they really had to do at the time. It did not stop it from being looted. However, it did deter it for a long time. They call it Institute of Archaeology. The Institute of Archaeology came out at the time. This must have been in the late 80s, and they found a bunch of polychrome vessels, 13 to be exact, and they took the polychrome vessels to the vault at Belmopan, and so they are stored there to this day. And I have seen them and recorded them. And William showed me where they were, so I was able to get them on my map as well. So those were saved. And so there they are, taking tourists to the cave. A lot of kids, as you can see, which is a great thing because we need to teach children about caves. I think this was actually a good thing. What they did was also there's a lot of artifacts that are up on high shelves. And so they put ladders so that you could go stand on the ladder and look at the shelf without having to go onto it. I thought that was a very good idea. This is a very interesting cave because it doesn't look like many of the caves that we see in Belize. It's what we call a boneyard cave. That's sort of it's not a technical term, but that's the term cavers use for these. And it's brecciated limestone, but it's a really, really hard limestone. So it doesn't have a lot of cracks in it. So you get very, very few speleothems growing in this cave. In fact, there's speleothems only in one place. This is tunnel 2. We call it the mushroom tunnel because of those pots in the back that have lids placed over the top that make them look a little bit like mushrooms. I don't think they are mushrooms by any means, but they kind of look like mushrooms. And I thought it was really also kind of interesting the way that the shape of the pot sort of reflects the shape of the keyhole of the cave entrance there. So I thought that was really neat. But as you can see, these things were all arranged beautifully. William and his family did not do that. The Maya did this because when we move things, we can see where they actually dug little crevices and things to hold the pots. So that was not done by them. This was how it was left. I am absolutely convinced. Um, this is tunnel 1, which is also fabulous because, lots of big pots are always very impressive. We did some testing on these, and some of them didn't have anything in them. Some of them had corn residue, so we suspect they were used for making balche. And so these are used vessels. They were probably not new. All of them are broken in some way. Either the lip is broken off or the bottom is busted out. So, but they are I call them partial vessels. So we have a lot of partial vessels, and we do have a few that are totally intact in Chichen Ha. But the thing about this cave that's really, really astounding is that the first thing that I did after having mapped it was I did some test excavations. So I went through, and I think I put about 25 test pits in this cave. And so these were just little, half a meter test pits to just see how much deposit I had. Because I realized that because had it open for tourism, and there was a possibility that things had been moved around. I didn't want to rely totally on just doing a spatial analysis of where things were. I thought it would be really useful to do some excavations. And very, very few caves have very much sediment in them. Most caves, the sediment, if you get 50 centimeters, that's a lot. They'll usually have maybe 10 centimeters of sediment or something, and no real stratigraphy. We don't really get a lot of sedimentation in caves. And the sediment we do get tends to be diogenic bat guano. So this cave happened to have a lot of sediment. And so I was able to ascertain where the deepest deposits were. And the first things I did was I ran some radiocarbon dates on these deep deposits to see how old they actually were. Well, I was a grad student. This was my second cave I'd ever worked. And you can imagine my shock when I got very, very early dates off this charcoal from these sediments. I was really surprised. And so I decided that I should really look at changes over time because I have a very old cave. And in fact, as far as I know, it's the oldest dated ritual cave in the Maya lowlands. Now, there's caves that have archaic presence, but I don't think there's any that have predated Chichen Ha Cave. So this is, as far as we know from the data right now, I would claim this as being the earliest dated cave because I have radiocarbon dates and I think they're really good. So then I started thinking about this project. Well, what was I going to do? So I thought, well, I have all these artifacts. I have this great sediments. Why don't I look at changes in ritual practice over time? So looking at changes in behavior and how they're changing their behavior over time. And then I could take these data and I could correlate them. What's going on politically and environmentally. So what's going on the surface, what's going on out there that might foment these kinds of changes. So that was my working idea. And of course, the first thing I did is make a map. And this is a very simplified version of the map. My maps are actually highly detailed, but I just want to show you the tunnel system itself and how it works. So you'll appreciate some of our thoughts about where we put excavations. So they come in the entrance into this gated entrance, and you go down a long tunnel that funnels you into what we call chamber 2. And at chamber 2, the tunnel splits off. So in order to go to any of the back tunnels, you have to walk through chamber 2. And so there's a lot of the blue things that you're seeing there. Those are all ledges. And so there's a lot of artifacts on the ledges. There's also artifacts lining the tunnel itself. And there's quite a lot of artifacts in Chamber 2 on what we call Ledge 10, which is up at the top. And that ledge is about, let me think. It's probably about 4 meters high, maybe 5. It's way up there. If you fell off that ledge, it would be really bad. And I hated working up there, but it was chock full of stuff. So I had to spend several days up there going through the material and seeing what was up there. And getting up there was harrowing because when you climbed the ladder, you had to grab a rope and pull yourself up on the ledge, which meant your feet left the ladder and there were no footholds. And it was just, you're dangling from a rope from ledge 10, and it was really, that was pretty scary. So anyway, so there is Chamber 2. Now Chamber 2 is really interesting because it's the only place where we have a really large speleothem formation. So we have this chandelier in Chamber 2 that drips. And so when it rains, it's leaky, it drips. And so there's a pool that gets formed underneath this chandelier. There's also a chandelier right in the front of the cave, but this is the only one that once you get inside, this is it. We don't really have any more speleothem formations other than this. But lo and behold, one of the things I found from my test pits is that this seemed to be the place where there was the most activity going on. And it has the most activity at early time periods, which suggests that people were coming into the cave and they weren't dawdling around. They were coming back to this area and they were doing things here around this amazing formation. So I looked at 3 different things. So one of the things I did look at was how they use the space. And of course, I can date the ceramics, so I can see ceramics at different time periods and what's going on at these different time periods, how much is being brought in, where they're placing it. And so I looked at the artifact assemblage as well to answer those kind of questions. And then I did something else that no one else has done, I don't think, in a long time. I think there are studies elsewhere, but I don't think anyone's done it in the Maya area. And that is that I looked at charcoal. So I was looking at the amount of charcoal in each level of my excavation to see if there's more charcoal in some levels than others. So I literally counted every single little fleck of charcoal in every single level of my excavation to try to come up with a proxy for what I'm calling use intensity. This is a really hard thing to study. It's hard to study ethnographically because you don't have the time depth, but it's also hard to study archaeologically because you have to find a proxy for it. And so this is what I used as my proxy. And I got some very, very interesting data. And so I had two ways to look at it. I could look at the artifact assemblage and seeing how much was being brought in terms of artifacts, but then I could also look at the charcoal to see. It's a more indirect approach, but at the same time, it'll tell you if they're lingering or if there's more people. It's a really good proxy for that sort of thing. And so this is the map of Chamber 2 and showing where we put the excavation. So what we did, and this was unique at its time, now we do this stuff all the time. It's not a big deal. We do photogrammetry on everything. But at the time, this was in 1997, 98. And so I actually had to stitch all the photographs together. So we took the photographs in the cave, we stitched them in the cave, and then layer by layer, we had one of these. We had like an entire 2x8 matrix of what was going on in the excavation, and we took it all down layer by layer so that we could photograph it and count the charcoal flecks. I was very lucky because this was it's very horizontal, it's very flat. I didn't have to contend with a lot of issues, so it was easy to do that right there. And there's, as you can see, there's my stalactite on the right, and there's the pool that occurs when it rains. There's always a little water in there, but when it rains, it gets bigger. And so this is what I did. And so I'm just showing you the profile now, the excavation. And so I dated every single one of these layers. I ran over 42 dates in the whole cave, which is quite a lot for a cave. But I had at least 1 or 2 dates from each one of these layers. And as you can see, the stratigraphy is absolutely beautiful. This really warms the heart of any archaeologist to see stratigraphy like this. So we didn't have any reversals. We didn't have anything digging in here. You know, nobody had come and put potholes in my cave other than me when I did the test pits. But this is it. This is as good as it gets. And so one of the things you can see is down here, there's not very much charcoal. This is really early. There was a bunch of speleothems on the floor. I'm thinking that might have been from some sort of earthquake or something. It goes all the way back to the Pleistocene. So this is as far back as we can date it. I did go down to bedrock. So this was a bedrock date. And then bats had been coming in. Obviously, this is all diogenic bat guano. It's just clays, sand, and the clays are guano, and they're very, very high in phosphates and oddly enough copper, which I don't quite understand, but it's an interesting question. And as you can see, we get these layers. So we get archaic layers. There's a few little pieces of charcoal in the archaic layer, suggesting, you know, maybe somebody came through then. But where you really start to see people coming in is what we call the dark earth. And so in archaeology, it's really interesting when people start using a space, it turns the soil dark brown. And so you can really see where people started to come in, and you can see all the little charcoal flecks in there, that we start to get a lot of charcoal flecks in the middle preclassic period. And the dates range, radiocarbon 2 sigma dates date from 1320 to 820. And then we get up to the preclassic period, and then there's hardly anything. There's this little skinny layer. So what do I think is happening in this weird little skinny layer? I think what we're seeing is that they closed the cave off at some point in the preclassic period. So they literally blocked up the entrance and the bats weren't coming in. So we don't have a big accumulation of guano. And that's why that layer is so thin. The other thing about that layer that's very interesting is you get these little white flakes. And what this is it's literally it's calcite slough that's coming off the ceiling of the cave, and it makes these funny little crusts. And they also can precipitate if you don't step on them. They can actually precipitate out of the guano. And so I think that's what we're seeing there is disuse. And then when they come back in, they come in like gangbusters. And so somewhere around 210 AD, they start coming back into the cave, and look at the charcoal. So much charcoal that you can even see it in this photograph. There's just tons and tons and tons. So they're really using it a lot in the early classic period. And then we get up to the late classic, and it's really interesting because the modern surface is the late classic surface. Remember, they blocked off the cave when they left. They blocked the whole doorway off, so no bats could come in. So you don't have a big accumulation of guano, and people are literally walking around on the late classic to terminal classic surface. So that's my profile, and that's what we worked on. And so once I had 17 layers altogether. And they were dated. So I've lumped them for you into a nice little chart so you can see what's happening. And let's think about this a little bit. So here we are in the middle, early to middle preclassic period. And we have very, very few ceramics in the cave, just maybe a dozen. There really wasn't much, but they were here. They were identifiable, and they were placed in different parts of the cave. But look at all the charcoal. Wow, lots. So this is very interesting because it suggests that they're not bringing a lot of artifacts in, but they are coming in and doing things. And I would suggest that probably what they're doing is they're coming in and they're praying. They may be singing, they may be dancing. They are certainly gathered around that speleothem in chamber 2, and I think that's what we're seeing in the late preclassic, which also correlates with the Maya hiatus. We don't have much of anything. We have very little charcoal, very few ceramics, not a lot going on in the late preclassic. In the early classic, starting about somewhere after 210 AD, they start coming in like gangbusters. We get a lot of charcoal. We get many more ceramics. So they start really bringing a lot of things in. They were putting things in that same chamber. Chamber 2 on ledge 10 was where most of that material was, but it was also scattered in some hallways and things, but it was up on that ledge. Then in the late classic, this is really odd. We have very few charcoal bits in the late classic. And so on the surface, there was almost nothing. Now, it could have been, stomped into place, right? So we're not seeing it. But this is a pattern that I've seen in many caves, that we don't see the charcoal in the late classic period that we see at other times. So I do have some thoughts about that. And I think part of what might be happening is that they're not burning pine anymore. They're burning a different kind of hardwood that doesn't throw off the kind of charcoal that pine throws out. And so we know from some micromorphology and other things that I've done that they were using pine. And in my excavations, I'm seeing pine. But in the late classic, I'm just not seeing very much charcoal at all, either on the late classic ledges or in the deposits, but lots of stuff. So we know they're coming in. We know they had to light their way, but they're bringing lots and lots of ceramics at that point. Oops, there we go. And so let's look at the distributions a little bit. So at Chichen Maha, we had things, in the terminal pre-classic to the early classic, we had a lot of stuff up on ledge 10, as I mentioned, and, distributed throughout the cave. However, in the late classic period, which is the Spanish lookout phase, we call it, in ceramics, which dates to about 7 to 900 AD, they're putting things up on these ledges. They're going to all the ledges, and they're going to these kind of more esoteric places like Crawl 3, which I've suggested elsewhere is a sweat bath. They're going into Tunnel 2, which is also kind of more one of the more esoteric places. And then they're going up on these ledges. Ledge 7, Ledge 8. I'm going to show you a picture of some of them. They're amazing. So they have lots and lots of stuff. Elevated Passage 1, that's when they bring all those big pots that we're seeing. Those are all dating to the late classic period. And that's when they're bringing them in, and they're putting them up on ledges and in strange places. And so this is kind of what the assemblages look like. So there's ledge 10. There's our early classic assemblage. And as you can see, it's highly fragmentary. They really break everything up. One of the interesting things that we find in caves, and I'm sure you may have heard this before, is that they'll break something and we'll find most of the pieces of it, but we won't find it all. There'll always be a piece missing, suggesting that they're taking this piece out with them, especially if we're looking at everything in the cave and we don't find it anywhere. They're probably removing this piece, taking it with them, using it in another ceremony, which is what I'm calling it ritual linkage. So in other words, they're tying their rituals together. They're taking this sacred thing from this one ritual and they're bringing it to be a sacred thing in another ritual. I think, which is really, really interesting. I've never been able to prove it, so I haven't written about it, but you're hearing about it today. And then this is an example of ledge 7. And in ledge 7, look at what we have. Very different looking assemblage. So they're doing something very different between the early classic and the late classic period. So I started thinking about these jars, and I'm like, well, what are these jars about? Like, what could they be doing? And so my interpretation of this is that they are bringing in these partially intact and some intact jars as a way of intensifying their ritual and as a way of sympathetic magic, right? They're saying, here's the water jar, please fill it. And we know that rain deities can be seen with water jars. There's ethnographic information that suggests that the moon goddess has the moon itself is a large oya, and that over time at rainy season it tips and pours water onto the earth. There's plenty of information to suggest that this is a perfect gift for a rain deity. And so then I started to look at my dates, and I thought, well, we know there's this change in ritual practice. Why? What is it that's different? Why would they change their ritual practice? Because changes in ritual practice are fomented by actual events. And so I looked at my radiocarbon dates. These are my late classic dates that I have for the cave. I have 5. I have lots of really early dates. I don't have that many late dates because remember, there's not that much charcoal. So I did find some charcoal in different places. I dated some corn cobs. I dated some interesting things. But at any rate, um, so my earliest late classic date is 680, and my latest is 960. So that gives me a span of those dates of what's going on, and of course that correlates very nicely with Gifford's type variety. So those late classic jars are dating 7 to 900 in Gifford or 950, depending on when you want to have the terminal classic. There's debates on that. But at any rate, but I have very nice dates that fit very well with my ceramic dates. So I decided, well, I was very lucky because they were starting to do this work on speleothems, and they James Webster did the first one in Belize, where he did a climate proxy based on speleothem data from caves. And he was at a cave very close on the Baca Plateau. It was less than 25 miles away from Chichen Ha, and he did a proxy, and it was very suggestive. And so I used that proxy. This proxy came out later. This is one that Doug Kennett did. This is the Yoke 1, and I was there when they took these samples. And this is from southern Belize, though, so a whole different area, right? And what they do is they can use uranium thorium to date the single little rings. And so, speleothems grow very much like trees. So they have rings every year. There's all kinds of things they can do. They can look at the amount of dust in the ring as one proxy. They can do delta O18, which I'm not going to explain right now because it's very complicated, but it's an oxygen isotope to figure out how much rainfall is happening. And so this is what their data looks like. And as you can see, there's some pretty severe droughts. So there's some in the late pre-classic. There's one in the early classic. And this is the one, though, that happens during the classic Maya collapse. So this went from, they're dating it to 780 to about 840. And then, again, and then a huge one a little bit later around 1000 BC, 1100 BC. I'm sorry, AD. So we're getting lots of different droughts happening, and it's interesting because this is not the most severe one yet. This is the one that seems to have been affecting the Maya the most. Why would that be? Well, possibly because their populations were quite high at the time. So they're in the classic period, in the terminal classic, their populations are at their highest. And now they're starting to have this drought. Now, they since have done a different climate proxy with a speleothem from the same cave, but they've come up with some different results. So they said, well, yeah, it's not that it's so dry, it's that rainfall becomes very unpredictable. And because it's unpredictable, people don't know when to plant. It's not getting rainfall at the right time. And so it's this unpredictableness at this time that's maybe actually causing the problem. And so out of this, Jaime and me and James Webster and George Brooke, we wrote an article together, and we were calling it a late classic drought cult that we suggest is happening in caves. So in other words, what we think is that people are going into caves to pray for rain, and that's what this change in ritual practice is that we've identified at Chichen Ha Cave. Now, this is the cave that was closer to me. This is the one James Webster did early on. And as you can see, the data still really amazing, right? So we have somewhere around 680, which is great. That's right about 680. We start to get this drying phase. So notice it starts to get dry and it peaks at 809. So you have like a couple of 100 years here, or 100 years, where it's getting drier and drier, and this is also when they're using the caves. And my dates fit very well into this. And now by 960, they have closed this cave off. And so this correlates quite nicely with what they're considering to be the ancient Maya 8th century collapse, or 9th century collapse. So that's my first case. So that was where we actually identified that there may be cult behavior going on, or they may be special behavior going on to pray for certain kinds of things during this really stressful time. So now let's look back. I had already done Octun Tunicha McNall. This was the first cave that I did for my master's thesis when I was working with Jaime. And so I recorded something they call the main chamber, which is the one, if you've been there, that's where they take you. You might stop at the Stela chamber, but they take you up to the main chamber. And so that was the area that I recorded. Now, this cave, people had been using it for many years. There is pre-classic material right in the entrance of the cave in a very high a little niche. It's a little alcove up in the beginning where you can see it. And then there used to be, but it's been washed out actually in recent years, but there were a number of early classic there was a lot of early classic material. About halfway through the tunnel, there was a little place where you went in, and there was a little kind of phreatic zone, was a little side tunnel, and it had a lot of early classic stuff in it. I had been back there recently, and it's all gone. It's either covered with mud, and you'd have to excavate it out, but you can't see it anymore. So I wasn't able to record it again, but we did record it in 1997. So I worked in this cave in 1996. I visited the cave. 97, I came back to do my research, and then I did a few finishing touches on it in 1998. But I was mainly working at Tishimha at that time. And so, as if you've been in, you know that the entrance is absolutely magnificent. It's on the Roaring Creek River, a little branch off the Roaring Creek River in western Belize. So Western Belize isn't that big. It's not that far away from Chichimha, but it is a little bit more remote, even though there are several nearby sites in that area as well. And this is the entrance. It's magnificent. It's one of the most amazing cave entrances that we have, and it's very alluring. But you don't absolutely have to swim to get in. There's ways you can get in, but most people swim through the pool to get in the cave, and that's where they take the tourists. So if you went there, you probably swam through the entrance pool. And once you get inside, it's one of the most beautiful caves in Belize. It's absolutely gorgeous. There is so much speleothem activity, beautiful stalactites, curtains, bacon. The cave itself, the water is beautiful. It's kind of mucked up in that picture because the tourists have been in. But if you go in before the tourists, it's absolutely crystal clear. There's all kinds of interesting animals. So there's blind shrimp and blind catfish. And it's just such a beautiful cave to be in. And it's big and open, and nobody has to worry about being claustrophobic. So it's what we call a wet cave. Chichima was a dry cave. It didn't have very much water at all, but this one has a lot of water. And so, this was taken for a photo shoot, so you could see how pretty the water can be. Ben Kim took this for Discover Magazine. They did an article on it, and that's me and Mark Robinson and somebody else, and Gonzo Pleites is there at the end, and we're walking through the cave. So gorgeous sight. Just lovely. It was mapped originally by Tom Miller. We are currently redoing Tom Miller's map, and I'll show you the basis of which we're redoing it. We're not going in and measuring. We're doing something else. So anyway, he did an excellent job. He was a fabulous caver and an excellent mapper, and he was the first one to map this cave. And then there was a British group that came as well, and they were the ones who actually saw it first. Well, actually, Tom saw it first, and then the Brits came. But at any rate, he identified something he called the Maya levels. And so you go into the cave entrance, and you walk about maybe 300-400 meters, and then you climb up a rock, and you go to these upper levels. And these upper levels are where the Maya really were using the cave in the late Classic period. These upper levels only date to the late Classic period. They're late to terminal 7 to 950 AD or CE. Sorry. And so what we did in the last couple of years is we've gone back and we have scanned this cave. We now have the entire cave scanned. Well, not quite the entire cave. We have this cave scanned all the way to the sump, where the tunnel system sumps out, and then we did a lot of these upper chambers. And these upper chambers are fascinating. There are very few artifacts. So there's the main what we call the main chamber. He calls it the Maya levels. That's the main chamber that you went to as a tourist if you've been there. So there's that, but then they go on and they go on and on and on. And so there's a huge cave behind these, but there's not a lot in it. But it's gorgeous. So let's get back to the Maya levels. This is what they look like, and you can see where you have to climb up to them, and then there's a number of chambers. You go through a little squeeze, and there's a bunch of chambers that you go to in the main chamber. This is the main chamber. This is what we call this area the cathedral, which is probably an inappropriate name for Maya space, but that it was stuck with it. I didn't name it, but this is what it was called. And so this is the area, and as you can see, it's beautiful. And if you haven't been there, you should put it on your bucket list, because this is one of the seven wonders of the world. It really is. It's something you really want to see. And you can see the beautiful rimstone dams. There's water all over the place. And I recorded 1,500 artifacts in this area, or in the main chamber. And a lot of them are placed in water. Many of them are covered with calcite. Some things I could identify, some things I couldn't. But for the most part, I could identify many things. And also from the shape, I could see what things were. And so the cave itself is just beautiful. I made a map. Jaime had started this map, so some of it was already done. And then I finished it up. And this map is 11 feet long. What do you do with 11-foot map? Well, you put it on a geographic information system so you can actually use it. And so I made a very detailed map of all the different areas. And so we named all the areas on the project. And like I said, not me, but they were named by the project. And so, which in a sense is a lot. I kind of like it better in some way that you're not in Operation 1, Operation 2, or Room 1, Room 2, right? Because it's easier to remember where you are when we say, oh, it's the creek area, or it's the burial chamber, it's the ransom chamber. Even though the names are really goofy, and we should probably have been a little more sensitive. There we go. And so this is the area that they're calling the main chamber. This is what we call the Oya altar. And again, here we are. We're seeing these big pots, right? None of these are intact. They all have the bottom's blown out in some way or other, or they have a piece off the end of the lip. They all are broken in some way. But this is an amazing thing, and this is the way the Maya left it. This chamber was as close to pristine as I could possibly want it to be. When I came in here and started working, and when Jaime started working, there had only been a few cavers in here. There had been no one else. And cavers are really, really good about not touching things and not picking things up. They know the rules, not stepping on stuff. They're really, really good about that. A lot better than students might I add. But anyway, so things were where they were. So this beautiful arrangement of these vessels, on this rock, which we're calling an altar, but it's an arrangement of beautiful vessels on this platform type thing. It's just gorgeous. And so very, very thoughtful also. And the aesthetic of leaving these offerings is obviously very, very thoughtful. And so we've again found a lot of these big pots. We have some radiocarbon dates for this cave. My earliest date is 695, and the latest is 945. So this chamber was used somewhere between 695 and 945, which are very interesting dates when you think of it. Like right there, exactly when we're starting to have all of these problems with rainfall. That the climate proxies show. Whatever you deduce the problems to be, whether it's lack of rainfall or unpredictable rainfall, either way, there are problems. So at this stressful time, again, dating to that. Now, the one thing in this cave that really sets it apart is that there's also human remains in this cave. And that's something, I'm sorry. There's also beautiful exotics. We get a lot of shoe pots in caves. This is probably the nicest one. It's completely intact. But as you can see, there's a little tiny chip right off the rim, right there. that was done. I'm fairly sure that's done intentionally, and it was done in the past. It wasn't. That's not a modern chip, as far as I know. I'm the only one who's picked that pot up. So maybe somebody else did, but I didn't break it, and it was already there when I saw it. So anyway, and we get fancy things. So we get these applique vessels with little duendes on them. Okay, and then we get all the stuff. But anyway, we get people. And so that's what's really unusual about this. And most of our people are put into these rimstone dam areas where they get flooded. So there's water. And because of that, there tends to be a lot of calcite buildup around. And so this person right here, I have suggested, is very similar to the maze god, partially because he had beautiful inlaid teeth that had been knocked out. He has a cone-shaped head, which is also awesome and very maze god-like. And he's near something that is three speleothems stacked together, which I think probably represents the center of the cave and probably the center of the ritual universe. So at any rate, I have suggested that this is the maze god. I know it can be argued. I know Barbara does not love this interpretation, but I think it's certainly a possibility that they could have been reenacting scenes from Popol Vuh, because we know that in myth and ritual, a lot of rituals are reenactments of myth in some way. So I think that you don't have to think that, but the important thing is that there are people in this cave, and they're all different age groups. So we have 17 entire skeletons and 2 secondary burials. So the entire skeletons, we break them down. We have 6 adults, 2 subadults, 9 infants. We can't sex all of them, we know, but we think they are male and female. Now, this is the person that they refer to as the Crystal Maiden. Um, there has been some controversy about her because Sherry Gibbs identified this person as a woman when she did the first identifications. She was doing this for her master's thesis, and then somebody else came back later and said, "Oh no, I think it's a man." We haven't. I think the jury is maybe out a little bit, but I know Vera Tiesler looked at the picture one time and said, "I think it's a woman," but we don't know for sure. We could know for sure if we took one of the teeth out and we did a DNA. So I think the only way we're going to really know whether this is a man or a woman is if we did the DNA. But this person has clearly, they are in their death position. They are glued to the floor with calcite, which is why we call it the crystal person. And as you can see, in a beautiful rimstone dam that on occasion fills up with water. And John, I think this is your picture, John. And so I'm going to give you credit for it right now because I think it's yours, even though I've taken other pictures since then. And John Lyle took this fabulous picture when he worked with me, many, many, many years ago. And we were going around and photographing things and looking at caves. And so this is what she looks like when she's floating in water, or not floating anymore. And then obviously she landed, with an arm back. So this is not how one would bury one's loved one. There are no grave goods. There's no artifacts. And in fact, I did an analysis on these skeletons in the cave, and none of them have artifacts placed around them. So they don't have any grave goods at all, and they're not technically buried. They're left in the cave because there's no deposit to bury them in. And this person is in a very esoteric area, way in the back of the main chamber. You have to climb a ladder to get up there. It's one of the most esoteric places in the cave. And we have a number of children as well that again are placed in water, and they're in these little they're hidden beneath ledges, and they're inside these little rooms, and they're tucked away. I think this is very interesting. And so Jaime and I are absolutely convinced that these people did not walk in here on their own, and that they are not burials, that these are actually interments, and that they are sacrificial victims, and that is part of what's happening during this time period is that we're seeing this ritual intensification. So, in other words, they're doing different things to try to change things. And I think part of what they're doing is they're also bringing humans into caves and sacrificing them. Now, I don't think necessarily rock shelters are human sacrifices at all. In fact, I think rock shelters are regular burial grounds. But I do think that when you're in the dark zone of a cave, it's a very if we argue this from context that these are sacrificial victims, but either way, whether they're sacrificial victims or whether they're burials, they are part of this intensification that I am seeing at this time period. Now, what's interesting is that there's a Baktun ending on March 15th, AD 830, which actually overlaps with the dates of the chamber. So this could also be some kind of world renewal rites, but then one thinks, well, that's maybe this is not mutually exclusive. Um, could it be termination rights? Because we know that they no longer use this cave. So this cave went out of use completely. So there's nothing else. There's no post classic in this cave at all. So it went completely out of use. So did they terminate it? That's another possibility. So or it could be all of the above. We could see intensification, we could see a world renewal right, and we could see termination all within this period. Because remember, this is a we're looking at almost 200 years here. So there could be lots of things going on at this time. But, eventually, this was a ritual failure of sorts. I don't like that word failure. It's just that it didn't do what they wanted it to do. It may have done other things. And that's when I start to think about what's happening out at Las Cuevas. So I have proposed that Las Cuevas is a late classic pilgrimage place. And it's a very interesting site because it's a cave that they have built a surface site on top of it. So it's built literally on top of the cave system. It's down here near Caracol. It's 24 kilometers southeast of Caracol as the crow flies. You could probably get there if you walked like a Maya for a day. It's not that far. But I have absolutely no evidence at all to suggest that Caracol was ever using the site, which is also kind of interesting. So it's in the Chiquibul Forest Reserve. And there's a field station out there where we can stay, which makes it easy to work there. And I've been working there since 2011. We've done a lot of work, including we've got a LiDAR, and so we have some really nice visualizations of the cave. And so what you see there is that there's a sinkhole. And at the bottom of the sinkhole, there's the cave entrance. And if you look at the bottom image where the blue and the green come together, you can see the cave entrance. There's like a hole right there. That's our cave entrance. So there's trees growing in the sinkhole, and there's trees growing on top of all the pyramids. And, it's the usual Maya site. It's got dense jungle all over it. But with the LiDAR, we can look down and we can actually see the ground surface. And so we can actually see the cave entrance when we look at it like on the side. And so you walk down into the sinkhole, you go into the cave, and then it runs around underneath the surface. And here is the map that we did. So we mapped all the surface stuff and we mapped all the cave and then the blue lines to the cave, and you can see where the cave runs underneath all these structures. And so the structure one is the tallest structure that we have, and it was also the most interesting. It had a frieze that must have had some kind of entrance. It must have had some kind of earth monster on it because we found a big tooth. We haven't found all of the frieze yet, but we did find this large tooth, which suggests to me that it probably had a frieze with some sort of toothy maw on it. And so we did a lot of work here. Obviously, since 2011, we excavated literally every structure at the site, and there's 26. Mo Carpenter did a lot of these excavations for me. She does a lot of excavations at Caracol. So she was really, really useful in being able to tell us if she saw any similarities to Caracol. And it's very interesting because Caracol has an awful lot of like finger bowls, and they have all these caches and all this stuff. not only do we not have caches in our stairways, but we do not have finger bowls and we do not have any burials. There is one secondary burial that's out there at that Plazuela group that you see over to the left in the what they call in structure 20. It's a secondary burial. It was a bundle burial, had lots of artifacts in it, and it had some broken down bones. It looks like a single person. It dated to the pre-classic period, even though everything else is dating late classic. All of these structures, every one of them, all date late classic. And yet this was this pre-classic bundle burial, which suggests to me that this may have been an ancestor that they brought with them when they settled the site. They were visiting the cave slightly earlier than when they began to build the surface site. So there had been visitations to the cave prior, but after this, they seem to grow in tandem. And so this is what it looks like from our LiDAR. You can see our ball court. You can see we have a twin pyramid. We have range structures. We have our northern structures, range structures, and all kinds of stuff. And so you can see where you walk down into the sinkhole itself. It was really interesting because we did a bunch of test pitting in the sinkhole, and we could literally see the path the people walked to get into the cave because there was artifacts scattered all along the path, and in the rest of the sinkhole there wasn't anything. So that was very interesting. And there's a platform right outside the cave entrance, and there were speleothems in the platform and little pieces of jewelry and all sorts of stuff. So there we go. So that's how you get in. And I showed you this picture, which is very reminiscent to me of the El Rey Monument. Then when you go inside the cave, this is what you see. So you step inside, and it's this vast room. It's huge. And there's a sinkhole inside of the cave. So I'm facing the sinkhole, which you can see. There's a river that comes up at the base of the sinkhole. It always has water in it, but sometimes more or less. So during rainy season, it fills more, obviously. And I think at one time it probably filled up, but it comes about halfway up. There's stairways that go down into it, or they're pretty wrecked, but they're there. And there's one very nice one, and there's also platforms down at the bottom of the sinkhole. The other thing is there's platforms all over the cave. This seems to be something that they're doing a lot of out in the Chicky Bowl in this area, that most of the caves have plastered platforms. But this one has a lot. So it has all of these structures with these plastered platforms on top of them. They are not in the greatest shape, but having said that, this site could be consolidated and it would be magnificent, because I mean you can even see just in this picture that there are some things that you can see that the walls are still intact. So there's a lot of intact retaining walls. We could really see to do kind of a virtual reconstruction of this. And so you go in there, and then you go to the back of the cave, and you get into a twilight area. And in the very back of the cave, I'm going to show you, there is a constriction, and they have built a wall across a constriction with a doorway that goes into the tunnel system that runs around underneath the buildings. So this cave has more architectural constructions than any other cave that I have seen in Belize. Right there, you can see at the bottom of the photograph, there's a bunch of steps. Those are Maya steps. Those are not modern. They have plaster on them. They were here. Those are Maya steps. And so they come down from the entrance. Somebody's standing on a platform right there. You hit a platform and you come down these steps, and it goes down into the sinkhole. And then it goes around the side, and you can get elsewhere. But it has terracing. It has 76 platforms, lots of rooms, blockages, and walls. And they've actually made little rooms where they've blocked off the cave in different places to make little alcove areas where they can do less public rituals. But this is a big public area. This is what it looks like from a different angle. And so as you can see, there's these beautiful platforms that have been built up with retaining walls. There's gorgeous plaster on top of them. I put some arrows in just to kind of catch your attention as to where they are, but they're all over the cave, and there's a lot more than what I'm showing you just in this picture. This is what they look like kind of close up. Beautiful plaster. My student Erin Ray did a project where she was looking at these plasters to determine what's on them. She found all kinds of interesting things. There's lots of burning. Even though this cave has been really heavily looted, we still found artifacts on the platforms when we scraped off all the bat guano. We found something like 14 obsidian blades that were still there, suggesting that they may have been doing bloodletting at some point. We don't really know what they're doing on the platforms, but we do find areas of burning, so they could be burning, bloodletting. They could be dancing. They could just be sitting there. They could be doing a lot of things. So we were hoping to get to that, and I think we got to it a little bit. One of the interesting things, though, is that when she did her chemical analysis, she found zinc on the platforms. So the thing with zinc is it's in blood, it's in human blood, so it could be from human blood, but we have no way of knowing because we could get vampire bats flying in and out. Then they would, of course, be pooing blood. So we had to eliminate that, but I've never seen a vampire bat in there, so I don't really think they get them, but they may have in the past. Anyway, the platforms are quite lovely. So there's my map of the entrance and the platforms that we identified. And we identified 76 altogether. And as you can see, they're kind of all over the place. So there's a whole bunch like in the front part of the cave, and then there's a whole bunch in the back part of the entrance right before you get to wall 1, which is right in here. So there's these here, and then there's these over here, and then there's a bunch over here. And then there's a few over on the side. And like I said, there's terracing and there's some platforms down here in the cenote itself, suggesting that they were also doing rituals in the cenote. This right here is what we call Unit 3. This was a broad horizontal excavation that Barbara Voorhees did, and it gave us an idea of what must have been in this cave before it got looted. So what happened to this cave was that there was this escaped criminal named Little John who was on the lam from the FBI, and he was hiding out in Belize, and he literally lived in the cave for a while. But he didn't just live there. He also removed carloads of artifacts, apparently, because we have eyewitnesses who lived in St. Augustine, or in Augustine, at the time when the Maya people lived in Augustine before they moved to San Antonio. They saw this guy with boatloads of stuff. So he took a lot out of the cave, and we have no way of ever recouping that. So it's just one of those things. But the architecture is so magnificent, we can still tell a lot. But based on Barbara's excavations, we found antlers, we found shell, we found a vomit spatula made out of manatee, we found 2 snuff bottles that were in the bottom of these, what we're calling retrieval pits, but they're funny little pits. They weren't post holes because you couldn't put a post up. Because the ceiling's too low. So there was just polychromes, tons of charcoal, tons of burning, lots and lots of stuff came out of that excavation because it was buried, which was a good thing. This is what the cenote looks like when it fills. So when it really, really rains hard, as you can see, the water starts to run, and then it comes up over on the top part of the picture, and then it sumps down here in the lower left corner. And we don't know where it goes from there. Let's go into a river, but this is some kind of underground river. And in fact, a lot of the caves in this area have this. So there's caves near here that have water in the back of them. So this is not that atypical, but it is an amazing feature. Then I promised you I'd show you what wall 1 looks like. So when you go the back of the entrance chamber, this is what you come to. And so they've literally blocked off the entire entrance of the cave. They built these beautiful terraces there. I mean, they're still intact today, which is amazing considering people have been tromping in and out of here. The British Army used to do these maneuvers where they would use blanks and they would shoot each other in the cave. I mean, there's just been some crazy stuff that's been happening in this cave. I feel so bad about it, but it's managed to like stay intact, which is really incredible. So this is a little doorway. It was a bit smaller. It has actual little door jams at the bottom. You can see the little door jams and see where it was before the looters tore it all out. So I think they were opening and closing the door of this cave. So when they're using it, they're opening it and then they're closing it up. Why are they closing the door? Well, they're either keeping something in or they're keeping something out. So it could be that they're trying to keep something in because ritually you can enclose things to keep the spirits in as well. But at any rate, they would close it when they would leave. And then we found the rocks where the looters had pulled them out. You can see right here. These are all the rocks that the looters pulled out of the door. So the cave looks something like this. So this is kind of a basic map of it. So you enter here at the drip line, and then you go around here, you walk around here, and then you go through here, and then here's wall 1. So that's your first blockage, right? You go through wall 1, and then you go through chamber 2, chamber 3. Now chamber 3 is really interesting because we found a sherd carpet there. There were over 42,000 sherds in chamber 3 alone that had been embedded into the floor from people walking on them, and we recorded all of them. Then you, whoops, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Then you go through here, and this is a blockage right here where you have to crawl through. So again, the cave has a natural constriction that they augmented with the blockage that you crawl through. And then you go through a little bit more, and you have another blockage here. Again, augmented, you have to crawl through it. And then you keep going, and you go through here, you go through chamber 5, you go through this little squeeze, it's a little tunnel, and then you get out here, and then you come here, and then there's wall 2. And so there's a second formal wall. This is a formal construction. Then you go to wall 3. Now what's interesting is wall 3 completely blocks this side of the cave, which was open at one time. You could just walk through. Oh, no. They blocked it up all the way to the ceiling so that you couldn't walk through. There's no doorway. It's been looted. But having said that, I do not believe there was ever a doorway because it forces you to crawl through this little thing. And it's a little squeeze. It's about 5 meters long that makes you have to crawl. Then you come out. I'm going to show you a picture of it. Then you come out into chamber 8. And when you get here, you're about maybe 10, 12 meters above the chamber floor, and you're looking out onto the entrance, and it's quite dramatic. So let's show you what it looks like. So this is where they blocked up the cave on this side, which would have been, there's the blockage, and it's been torn out. You can see where it's been torn out. And then this is what you have to crawl through. This is also constructed. So this is all construction. So they make you crawl through this little thing. This is very interesting. So to go through this tunnel system, there's all of these sort of rites of passage as you go through that I have suggested may indicate levels of the underworld, or that you're going further and further into the cave. There is evidence that they may have been stopping in front of these blockages and doing some rituals before they go to the next area. And this is what you see when you get to the end. So you can stand in this window and you can look out onto all the platforms. Here's the cenote. You can really see the stairs here. This is the cave entrance over here on the right. Very interesting. Now, the other thing about this view from the window is that you can whisper. Not exactly whisper, but you can talk in just a normal voice. And you can be heard all the way over to the other side of the cave on the platforms. And if you were sitting on the platforms, this is what you would see if someone were lit up in that window. I call it the Wonder Woman. That's Nancy Pistole there standing in the window itself. And as you can see, it's very dramatic. So this suggests all kinds of things about what might have been going on in Las Cuevas in this very dramatic setting, and that we have all of these platforms. So these platforms could have held. They could have held up to 1,500 people, depending on how you count them. But that's a fairly conservative number. That's if they're sitting. If they're standing, you could hold even more. So these rites, were big public rites. And then there's also this private part. So there's this big public part, and then there's this part where you have to go through all these little squeezes and you have to crawl, and they have it all blocked off so that it's obviously not for the general public. And then when you get out, you're in this kind of place of power where you can be seen and you can be heard. So it's what I'm calling an oration station. There's more than one in this cave, but this is the one that I think is the most interesting. And so when I think about what's going on at Las Cuevas, now we have a different practice altogether, that we have this bringing in the public. This is all late classic. All the structures are late classic, all the platforms are late classic, all the artifacts that we found, our 42,000 sherds, everything is late classic. Our radiocarbon dates are late classic. We have some pre-classic material underneath the ball court, but it's way buried under the ball court. So yes, there were people in the area. Yes, they must have known about the cave, but they were not using this cave, and they were not building all of this until the late classic period. So why would they do such a thing? I have some ideas about that. And I think part of what we're seeing is that in a time of stress, one way to bring people together is to do rituals. And so I am interpreting this as bringing the public in to do rituals with the leaders, with the community leaders, with whoever was running the site. I don't actually think it was a king. I think it was some sort of royal, I'm sure, who could command labor. But at the same time, there's no evidence that a king lived here. We don't have any writing. We have lots of management. So it was somebody who had management. Probably, I think it was somebody who was probably a charismatic leader of some kind. So at any rate, you could actually do community rituals. You could have a whole bunch of people standing in that window. You could have three or four. So but it's a way to bring people together in solidarity. And I think one of the beauties of this is that it's a tale for us, right? To think about that when things get bad in our own society, are we going to fight each other, or are we going to come together and pray and do rituals and try to come together in solidarity, some kind of way? So I think it's a lovely story, actually, about the Maya. So what happens, just in general, almost all the caves, 47% of the caves, half of them, come into use for the first time in the early classic period and the late classic. So we have the early late classic, the late classic. Early classic, this is more than all of these put together. So we do have a growing amount of cave use that really booms in the late classic. So around the time of stress. Actually, though, when you think about it, could it be population? Could this be a function of population growth? Yes, it could be, except that I think that people knew about a lot of these caves. They just didn't use them, just like they didn't use the main chamber of Octoon and McNall until the late classic, until they needed it. So I think that's part of what we're seeing. But there's also this whole idea of this drought cult of these big pots that we're seeing in caves all over Belize. I see it in southern Belize. I see it in northern Belize. Everywhere that I have been in a cave, you can almost count on finding late classic jars. And once a cave starts being used, they used it all the way through the late classic. So if they start using it in the early classic, they will use it until the late classic. But the other thing that I've seen is that there is no post-classic material in the caves I have looked at, and I've looked at a lot, and I cannot find anything to speak of. I know there has been a report that there might be something in Shinona Cave, but if it is, I seriously doubt it. I have a feeling it's probably been mistyped because I have not found any evidence of post-classic usage. So, in conclusion, what do I make out of all of this? One of the things that I'm really starting to think about is that I think we're seeing different types of intensification of rituals, beginning in the late to terminal classic period. And then I think we can identify these rituals in practice, but these rituals in practice have meaning. And I think the meaning is that this is something that they're doing out of stress, out of a need. It's coming out of a need. I think also that we're seeing these public areas, and I have a student who did a whole study on little structures that are built right outside the entrance of caves. Guess what they date to? Late classic period. So that's again, they're having more public areas, incorporating more people into their rituals. And I think the climate proxies certainly suggest that there's some kind of catastrophic climate event, and that's part of what they're reacting to. But even though that's complex, right? And also that one of the interesting things is that interior cave use seems to cease by somewhere between 950 and 1000 AD. And there's almost no post-classic cave use. Well, what does that mean? To me, it suggests that people are not using these sites. They're not going into the entrance or into the interiors of them because they're losing faith in their leaders. And these caves were often used by, I think, political elites of one ilk or another, whether they were kings or community leaders. They were the ones who co opted the caves really early on, and they were the ones who initiated a lot of these rituals. And so I think what's happening is we're seeing a loss of faith in leadership. And that's why they are no longer going into these caves, is because their beliefs are changing. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. So David Webster, he mentions that he sees that there's this decline in royal institutions and ideological resistance, right? That's being caused by these external stresses, that there's change in political systems. It occurs in the minds of the masses. So again, loss of faith. Mary Ellen Miller, the disjunction between what was known of the cosmos and what was happening may have been so profound that faith ebbed among the Maya. Lisa Lucero put it really well. Rulers were probably blamed for all the mishaps occurring as a result of climate change, as well as for decreasing resources. So I really think that all my caves feed into these ideas, and that there is definitely some cautionary tales here for us as humans living through climate change. And that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Holly. That was really, really a great program. And thank you for being so energetic after I put you through such a stressful hour. I had, I had no,
It's all about the stress.
I had no idea that that could have been a problem on my side because I've been doing these programs for almost 6 years and I don't change my sound settings. I don't change anything. And I guess apparently it was my fault, so I'm sorry for that. Um, there's not too many questions going on yet. Alex Krim, who's here tonight, and he has an excellent article about the 7 and 11 god vases in the current October Aztlander, and he'll be presenting for us in January or February. But he asks, uh, you mentioned and showed quite a few examples of chalk. Did you find any evidence of other rainstorm water deities such as Kawil or the water lily serpent?
No, there's very Barbara did though, because she says here in the she's Barbara McLeod says there was a sculpted Tlaloc mask on the clay wall in Footprint Cave above the floor of the main passage. I was the first to see it, and Liz Graham reported it.
Right.
So it's thin evidence. We don't have any sculptures of chalk. I'll tell you what I do have though. I have two caves that have got they've got petroglyphs carved into them, into speleothems. And Chris Helmke is currently looking at some of these, and there's some frogs, which I thought was interesting, considering the Chachak ceremony. I thought, oh, look at these little froggy things. So I'm going to wait and see what Christoph has to say about it before I talk about it too much. But that will be upcoming. And that was at a Frenda Cave and a cave out by Cuevas called Bird Tower Cave. We have these amazing carvings. So we may find a little bit more, but no, very little. And we don't have a lot of cave paintings. There's some handprints out by Tunicho McNaught Handprint Cave, if anybody's seen those. But they're the handprints that we see often in Paleolithic caves and everywhere else, right? Yeah, I do have a question here. Have you found any evidence of human sacrifices were done willingly or not? you know, to be honest, the only models that we have are the Aztec models. And the Aztecs suggest that maybe sometimes if somebody wanted to commit suicide or if they were really, really sick, they could use it as a form of euthanasia or something. Uh, so it's possible, but no, no, I have no evidence.
Holly, could I ask you to close out of your PowerPoint so that we can see see you big, and
Okay, let me. Uh,
you didn't make any changes.
Hang on. Let me get rid of some of the. Oh, and I got to stop share. Hang on.
And
Did I
isn't
stop share? Yeah.
the Tala sculpture or something like that in the ceremonial cave of Chichen Itza, the Balanconche? There's a sculpture there that's pretty prominent. Veritisler, I wonder if you have found evidence for collecting virgin water, not from rainfall directly out of entrails of the earth. Yucatec Maya use such water in rituals dedicated to Chok Chok rituals.
Yeah, and it would be pure water if it came off a speleothem. So there's numerous examples where there's vessels that are they're put right under speleothems that drip, and so you get these big calcite formations inside the vessel from the drip.
Right.
So that could be evidence that they're collecting rainwater. Yeah, absolutely.
I found, I mean, years ago, back in the 70s, when I was more into making a yoga retreat in Belize, when I lived there year and a half, and but I had a Maya friend, and he had a horse. He had a couple horses, and we went out uh, into the mountains for 3 days, and we stopped by some caves. And this one cave, you could just tell that, oh, people lived here. They slept over there, and they built their fire here. And then I saw these little footprints carved into this giant side boulder. And of course, I just followed the footprints up, and I came to this ledge where you could look over towards the interior of the cave. But there were places like where drips had made holes that filled up with backwater. And of course, I mean, I didn't even have a spoon with me, but I felt compelled to dig down in this backwater, and I found a beautiful double pointed, what do you call them, fluted spear point or whatever. Excellent condition. I showed it to George Stewart one time, and he goes, "This is one of the best examples I've seen." But I mean, and those other little depressions that you mentioned that weren't post holes, were they drip holes, and could they have been cash?
Yeah, well, they had stuff in them, you know. So they had one of them had a little snuff bottle that was carved. It was beautiful. And then we found bone and ceramics and other things down in these holes.
Oh,
But and I really thought because Dory Rintz and Barbara had suggested that they had scaffolds right in petroglyph, but these couldn't be scaffolds because the ceiling was like it was so tiny, like you had to sit, you couldn't even partially stand up under some of these holes. And so we really, someday I'd like to crowdsource some ideas about these holes. So I had a student that worked in Turkey, and she said, "Oh, those are retrieval pits," and I'm like, "What's that?" Right? So I don't know, but they do seem to be some kind of an offering thing, right? They didn't all have stuff in them,
right.
and there was no evidence that there was any wood in it, even though they're the right size for post holes. They were like 8 to 10 centimeters. So they were the right size, but I don't think they were post holes. Maybe a little altar thing, but
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
They're a mystery.
it'd be a nice place if you wanted to go in and make an offering and put in something personal. You could dig down in the hole in the back guano and put your thing and then cover it back up. Nobody would know it's there. So I can understand, how that would be.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean that's as good as anything. I have no idea. There's so many mysterious things in caves. I find stuff that I have no idea. I'm going to write an article someday called "Lost Rituals of the Ancient Maya" because it's stuff that they're doing something, but we have absolutely no idea of
right,
what this stuff is. Like I did this one cave called Eduardo Carraz, which I'm sure people have read the report that David Pendergast wrote. And in the back of Eduardo Carraz, he didn't report this because I don't think he got back there all the way. But there was this whole room that was full of these things. We're calling them corn moles. And what they are is there's some kind of clay calcite kind of thing that have corn impressions. And it looks like they took baskets and dumped them out, and that the corn rotted away, and it leaves all these impressions in whatever this gunk is. And the whole floor was littered with these things.
Wow.
I don't know. But, right? So, I mean, it's corn. But there was other stuff too. And so there was also some basket impressions, and there was something that might have been pine needle. They were very weird. Scott, hang on 1 second. I want to call Alan out here because this is brilliant. Alan, I never thought of this. Would that be virgin water or amniotic fluid from the interior? From the ethnography, maybe amniotic fluid, or maybe it's breast milk. I don't know, but that's a brilliant idea, Alan. I had never thought of it. I love that. Yeah. Okay, Scott, what you got? Scott's got a question.
Who?
I was just going to throw out one thing for your small post holes that aren't post holes.
Yeah.
We've got some in the Mimbris that we're pretty confident were for umbilical cords.
Oh, really?
Oh.
There's one room at one site that had when Harry Schaefer was presenting this to us, and he's like, this room is down in the southeast corner, very sort of isolated. And he's like, it's got 20 some post holes all randomly. And Barb Roth and I immediately said, those are umbilical cords. And we found a similar room in one of the other sites, so it's not as well documented.
But how would you know that? Were there the remains there, or what? How would you know that umbilical cords had been in there?
It's just a hypothesis based on ethnographic information.
Oh, okay. I think
we're pretty confident about that. We think the room itself was a women's site. So the thing that would be to look at is this part of the cave a women's area, perhaps, like Cheryl Clausen has documented in the southeast with rock shelters that were women's sites.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you find grinding features, and there's most of the other things that she would point to for evidence would not survive because they're perishable. But if you find grinding features in association, that's one thing to look for. Anyway, just one thing to throw out.
Cool idea. I hadn't thought of that one. There you go.
Thanks for your shout out to Jaime Awe. I mean, I've been hanging with Jaime for a couple decades, but I went to Belize specifically to meet with him and to record him talking about the couple panels there from Caracol Naranjo that they had discovered at Zunantanich. And I had eaten lunch at the hotel and restaurant outside of Cajalpech. And then Jaime comes driving up next to me and he goes, Jim, I'm taking some students to ATMK. You want to go with me? And I declined. Can you imagine I declined because I didn't want to get wet and I knew you couldn't take a camera in there now. So I declined going in. But Chechemal Cave is a place I've been to myself a couple times, and then I've taken groups there. But also the first couple times we were with the man who, was the landowner and had lost his dog in there and went in there and discovered it. So, and I'm really glad they left everything in situ. That was a great cave.
Yeah, it is a great cave. We scanned it this year.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, it's still in pretty good shape. But while I was working that cave, it got looted. Somebody broke in during the winter when I wasn't there.
Oh,
and yeah, that was 18 vessels got stolen. Oh, I had pictures of all of them, and they were funny little things. Like there was a little black bowl, and there were some little red bowls. It was, it was nice. It was nice stuff, but it wasn't like polychromes or anything like that. And I thought, why would anybody even want this stuff?
Right. Oh, well,
yeah.
sad.
Yeah, no, it's, the looting situation, it's really grim.
Yeah, they're especially there around the. I mean, I lived in Belize right there in Socots by Viejo, and you're right there on the Bandito highway that comes out of Guatemala, and
Yeah.
there's so much. I mean, there's so much, and in the past couple decades, people know there's a cave, people know there's a ruin, they want to go find what they can find. But Barb is still here. Come on, Barb, why don't you make some comments?
Well, one of the comments I was going to make was an almost comment. In 1973, I had a canoe in Belize. I had a 17-foot aluminum canoe, and boy, did I enjoy the heck out of that because that's something that's pretty easy. Even one person in good shape can pick that thing up and carry it. And so wherever portages were needed, it was pretty easy to do it. But I took that thing on a number of rivers. But one of the things that I did with it would have been in 1973 when my brother came down and visited me for a couple of weeks. I had heard rumors. Now, this is again 73, but I'd heard rumors that there was a cave way up on Roaring Creek. Now, I can't remember who said this. It was just one of those things that was in the air. But my brother and I decided to start out early one morning from Roaring Creek Village with the canoe and go as far up Roaring Creek as we could get. And it turned out to be very slow going because as you get further upstream, there were lots and lots of fallen logs across the creek and lots of big snags and just branches hanging down and lots of places where we had to get out and push the canoe underneath things or drag branches out of the way or carry the canoe around. And so the travel was much slower than we thought, but nonetheless, when you're traveling by a creek as opposed to a trail that runs alongside, you're having to traverse just all of the loops of the stream itself, and so it was getting dark. I mean, we started out at first light. It was getting dark, and we're pretty far up there. I can't honestly tell you how close to Aktun Tunichil Muknal we might have been. But I think that we would have found it if we had persisted. But it was getting dark enough that we're thinking, you know what? We don't really want to have to go back at night. We did have headlamps, but had been slow enough going, just getting as far as we got. So we turned around
Ah.
and never made another attempt. So yeah, but I can't complain. I got to make a lot of first discoveries in Belize, as Holly knows, and I'm quite happy about the privilege of doing a lot of caving, hardcore, serious caving back in the early 70s, at a time when no one else was really doing that, and working for the archaeology department as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I pretty much had carte blanche to go into caves, document, and remove artifacts. They wanted artifacts to be taken out, unless there was absolutely no risk that they would be looted. And how do you know in that case? Just in the category of unexplained rituals, if that was the title, um, in Caves Branch Cave, the main stream passage actually has a side passage, and we went up the side passage and found an awful lot of otherwise, not previously discovered polychrome vessels that were cemented into the floor, things like this. These were first discoveries, and and fairly far up that stream passage, there was a section where the water got pretty deep. But we're traveling in inner tubes at this point. We're not just swimming. And in one of those deep sections, just on the side of the stream, on the mud bank, there were bunches of net sinkers, ceramic net sinkers.
Oh.
And I could imagine that a net that was being weighed down with these sinkers. There were, I don't know, a couple dozen of them anyway. Just all in a bunch on the side of the bank. And this is old. This would have been deposited there probably in the late Classic. There was some ritual activity there, some charcoal. I think there was a stingray spine. There were a couple ceramic vessels. But I have to question, you God in the universe, what is this? Is this a fishing ritual? There were big catfish in that stream in different places. There were places where you could walk in water that was, maybe up to your knees or a little deeper. And if you're good at it, you'd see these monstrous catfish, and you could just reach down and grab them, if you weren't too afraid of getting nailed with a catfish spine. We didn't try catching them that way, but they were right there. And so here's a situation where the very unusual ritual evidence involving net sinkers in a cave.
Well, Chuck is a fisherman.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Maybe he noodled. They were doing noodling, cave noodling.
Well, I'm sure that those net sinkers have got to be, in the archives of the archaeology department somewhere, wherever they got things like that stored from the 70s, with all the documentation that I could provide. And it's still, I think, something of a mystery because it was clearly a ritual activity area. It wasn't just somebody accidentally leaving these behind.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you had the snake up on the speleothem.
Oh, yeah. That was in
That's
Petroglyph
another
Cave.
weird one.
Two of them. I had two of them coiled, they had been carried in and they were left on these, some of the speleothems in that big chamber, the downstream burial chamber in Petroglyph Cave. Some of the speleothems have these great big blades, these sort of flat, almost like flower petals on them. They're just huge. And these snake skeletons had been positioned coiled up by humans, obviously. I don't think the snake crawled in there and died and stayed that way. And that's the mystery as well. What's this?
It was.
I think between us, we could probably come up with a long list,
Oh, yeah, we could. Definitely.
Curiosities.
A long and fabulous list.
Yeah.
Yes. With pictures.
Just goes to show there's a lot we don't know. A lot we don't know about what they were doing in caves. And a lot that we are starting to figure out, and we're seeing that it's a much more ample range of activities than we previously thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to ask you because I have not actually been in Tunichi Muknal, and I only went kind of a short distance into the entrance at Las Cuevas. But does Las Cuevas have some charcoal? It must have some charcoal.
It does. Yeah, I have a bunch of dates.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all, well, I have one really weird date that's it's at the bottom of a mud pile. It's a single piece of charcoal, and there's no other charcoal in the mud, but it's archaic. So maybe somebody came through there in the archaic period.
Mm-hmm.
But almost all my dates are, right where they should be. I have one late date, and I think I forgot what it calibrated to, but it's like around AD 1010.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty late. I mean, it's 50, 60 years, right? Not that much, but it's still late.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a Mesoamerica ceramic on top of one of the buildings that Digby reported. So there must have been people around there kind of after everybody left. I think there were people who probably came back or were squatting there or whatever. So yeah, I have, and that wall too, the second wall that's right at the end, there was a late date off that, really late. And I'm like, I dated 10 dates on that wall to try to date that wall.
And that's remote enough that it has to actually be, an original date. Whoever left that there was actually there at that time. That's
absolutely. And it was in plaster, like a mud plaster. So they were taking pieces of mud and putting it on the wall. So they had all these stone stacked, and then they had mud around the wall. It wasn't real solid, and it wasn't well done. It was maybe this crazy.
Some of that mud just lasts forever. I mean, it's gooey. It's gooey. It was gooey 1,000 years ago, and it stays gooey because the air is so humid.
Yeah, and you can see the fingerprints in the mud. So, but I was thinking, I wonder if there's some weird thing they do where, part of what you do when you go through the wall is you get a piece of mud and slap it on there. I don't know. Maybe that's another weird ritual that I don't know about.
Well, I mean, again, a ritual space or whatever, in the stream passage of Footprint Cave, there's a place where you really don't have to climb out, but it's a whole lot easier to climb out of the stream itself and get up on a higher ledge. And along that ledge, the wall itself was just all clay, and you could see where they had been mining clay with some kind of a tined instrument. I mean, just
Huh.
imagine a fork with three tines, very, very thin tines, and they're using this to scrape clay off probably into a basket or something like that in order to collect it. But there were also just little pictographs mixed in amongst them as well, just little human figures and things like that, all animal figures, little
Wow.
curlicues and geometric figures. And I don't know whether anyone's ever documented that, but I was the first to see it.
I've never
And
read about it. I didn't know it was there.
I don't know that Liz Graham ever saw it when she did her report on the cave, and by now, I mean, I have to hope, knock on wood, that it's not been destroyed. But
Yeah.
that must have been a primary clay mining source, that cave, because it has so much really good quality clay. There was another side passage where we found the tools they were using up at the end of the clay face.
Wow.
Um, and so, like they just kind of, left and, said, okay, we'll come back tomorrow. And they never did. There was like a celt, um, and a blade. They didn't even seem to be particularly, tools particularly designed for mining. They were just using what they had because the clay was just so easily knocked off. You could just go dig with your fingers if you wanted to.
Huh.
So I'm thinking that was probably a primary clay source, that cave.
Wow.
And then, have we ever talked about John Littlejohn? Oh, I could tell you stories about him.
Oh, I want to know stories about John Littlejohn. What a
I
character.
maybe I should let's just communicate about that, because I mean some of it might not be the best thing to make public, but I got picked up once. I used to hitchhike in Belize fairly regularly, into Belize City from Belmopan, and there were times when I had a vehicle to drive there, but other times I didn't. He picked me up hitchhiking one time.
Did he have a boatload of artifacts?
No. And I was very careful not to ask him. But at that time, I mean, he did several scurrilous things. One of which was that, well, he ran a jaguar hunting camp back
Yeah.
before the U.S. made it illegal to import jaguar pelts and jaguar parts and things like that. I think that was 72 or so, that the U.S. shut that all down. But there used to be lots and lots of his clients who would come down from the U.S. to hunt jaguars, and they'd take the pelts and the skulls and all of those pieces of jaguars back home again. When I visited his camp, this is at this point, he's no longer living there. What year would this have been? Some, around that same time, 72, 73, which is when I went into the cave entrance.
Yeah.
There were jaguar skulls. There were like 20 of them hanging on the side of a shed out there at Las Cuevas in the tumble down structure that he was living in.
Uh,
And then later on, I think after the jaguar hunting business was shut down, he started running a correction facility for wayward youth,
yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
and that it eventually was shut down because one of the kids ran away, and he would sick the dogs on them to get them back, and apparently one of those kids in the process died. And so the Belizean government moved in and kind of put an end to all of that. But it was all, all very, dubious kinds of stuff that he was engaged in. And he was, my God, just as a character, a
Yeah.
mouthful of broken teeth, a big shaggy black beard that hung down to his chest, and I don't think he bathed very often.
And you got in a truck with him?
For about 45 or 50 minutes, yeah.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
dear.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, wow, I survived that.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, the things we survive, you just go, really, I did that? Oh.
Well, those were the days, I cherish them. I feel privileged that I got to do all that stuff back then.
Yeah,
And
I feel the same way because
mhm.
working with Jaime, I could work pretty much everywhere. This year, for the first time, I had a hell of a time getting a permit.
Oh,
They,
really?
it's yeah, and it's not the institute so much. It's that they are partnering now with all these other groups, so they wouldn't issue my permit until I had something from NBio, and NBio is their biodiversity unit,
Hmm.
and NBio sat on my permit for like a week. Well, so the minister of this and that didn't sign it, and I was calling there every day and stuff, and I'm like, this is my field time, it's getting wasted.
Right. Oh,
It was,
man.
yeah, no, now getting a permit's a big deal. And Cuevas, I have to get a permit from the logger. I have to get permission from Amin Badran to work at Cuevas.
All right. Wow.
They
Oh,
gave him they
mhm.
gave him management of the
Uh-huh.
Chiquibo Forest.
Oh, my
So
gosh.
they really put the fox in the hen house.
Oh, yeah. No, no
Yeah.
kidding.
Joel, thank you. I just saw Joel was heading out.
Joel, Joel had asked about the early date that you gave for Chechen Ha.
Yeah.
What was the earliest date you gave?
Uh I am claiming 1100 to 800 BC,
Wow.
but it could be older. It could be as old as 1300. But I won't go there. So I'm using the same dates that Jim Garber and Jaime are using for Cajalpeche and Floral Park, or not. What is it? Blackman Eddy. Because they have those really early dates. So I'm just aligning mine with theirs to be like when the earliest people,
Hmm.
But they could have been visiting the cave even earlier. So they could have been, because the date itself was like 13 something to 8 something. So it could have been a little earlier. I'm not pushing it.
Where was that sample taken from? I've been in Chechimha, so I know what's there.
Okay, so you know where the big speleothem is,
Yep.
inside, right? So that's
Yes.
where I put the excavation, is under there.
Okay. It's
And
in
this,
there.
yeah, it's in there. And I got a bunch of dates. It wasn't just one. I got 5 or 6 that all date to that, and they're in that brown earth.
Mm-hmm.
So and there's charcoal, whereas in the layer below there's no charcoal. So I'm pretty sure this is people.
So they're going to that site. I mean, it's a drip water site. It's a sacred site, in a cave that otherwise is quite dry.
Correct. And they're going right back there.
Right.
They're not hanging around, anywhere else. That's where they're going. They're going to that area. And I was going to show it. I wish I'd showed it since you guys all hung in there for me. But I have some heat maps of between the late classic period and the early classic period, or even the pre-classic. And in the early pre-classic, my charcoal maps, the charcoal's distributed all through the chamber. Whereas in the late classic, it's all in like one little place, and it's underneath one of the ledges. There's a ledge 9 in that chamber where it had late classic artifacts, and they're standing right beneath ledge 9. So somebody's standing there with a torch underneath ledge 9, but there's no other charcoal to speak of in the chamber. It doesn't even show up in the heat map. There's so little. Whereas in the heat map and the early stuff, it's all over the place, which suggests to me they're like singing and dancing or praying, or they're wandering around in that chamber.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just standing in one spot. So
Mm-hmm.
they could be dancing.
I just want to let you know Jen is here who says that she worked with you. She helped you out. But Scott has his hand up. Scott, you want to break in?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the question I've been asking for a long time, and now that I've sat on it some more, I wonder about even more looking at the dates, which is where's the hunting ritual? And I know Linda Brown's work, but that's on mostly late stuff. And you know now that we've got it in the Southwest going back over 4,000 years. In fact, that's when it's the distinct signal. 4,000 years, it's all they seem to be doing in caves pretty much, and maybe back to the Pleistocene.
I agree, but I just don't see it.
Yeah. I the pattern in the last 2,000 years is so similar
Yeah.
that I'm shocked to see I'm more conscious of it now than ever, now that I'm both familiar with the evidence from both regions, and it doesn't seem to be there in the Mesoamerica.
Well, Linda found it, but like you said, they're a little bit
Right.
later. But
Yeah.
and I mean, they have it in that area, and maybe that just in our area, they're just not doing hunting ritual. I don't know. I mean, I haven't found anything that we have leaf points, and we get points of different kinds, but I'm not sure
Well,
that.
the thing,
I don't know if that
yeah,
suggests hunting ritual. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
the
what would
one
you
possibility
expect?
is maybe it's
Yeah. What do you? What should we find? That's I think part of it is we don't have an expectation.
right. And in the Southwest, it's almost it's clearly going across multiple cultural regions,
Yeah.
a large part of the Southwest. In the Grand Canyon, we have split twig figurines.
All right. Yeah.
And, in the sort of central Southwest, we have the Correo Shrine where they were shooting out a lot of darts into the pit,
Oh yeah.
4,000 plus years ago. Down in the south, we have the site where they were leaving points or whole darts on an altar, and there's this huge pile. So
Yeah.
there's it's all the same time frame, more or less, but it's different manifestations in each site or in each region. So perhaps there was some completely different manifestation in Mesoamerica that doesn't translate and doesn't preserve.
That very well could be, but you'd think we'd find something. You know what I mean?
I would
Like
think there'd be something,
there'd be
points, for instance.
something.
Well,
Because some caves you get really good
points.
preservation. So I don't know. Barb, what do you
Right.
think?
I was just, well, I mean, we certainly do find points. I won't say they're very common, but we certainly do find them.
Yeah,
Um,
I would think there'd be a large accumulation if that was the
yeah, no,
offering.
I've
There's other
never
things in
heard
the
that.
Southwest where there's, less dense population are the offering pattern is very heavy.
Well,
Yeah.
how dependent were they on agriculture?
Not at that period, not at all. That's when corn was first appearing in the Southwest, and it was another 2,000 plus years before it really caught on. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're more dependent on hunting.
Well, of course, Mary Pole found a bunch of animal bone, or she suggested the animal bone might have something to do with some of the rituals with the maize god or with the deer. But but I
And
don't think
that's
she ever said hunting.
Yeah. And in the
Well, there
Southwest,
was,
that's, I've looked for that, and that's the one thing we do have it. And like in the lava tubes in Malpais, there are, from that time period, there are skeletal material. There is
Yeah.
skeletal material that's left, but it's not in these large amounts like in the other sites, the other areas, examples that I mentioned, where you just have hundreds or thousands of offerings.
Yeah.
So it's a puzzle.
It is.
Petrichor Cave had in the entrance. First of all, Holly, have you been to Petroglyph? You know what it's like there. That massive, massive entrance down underneath the sinkhole.
No,
But
I got trench foot the day I was supposed to go,
oh,
Oh my
and I
sorry.
God.
couldn't go.
But anyway, in the entrance there was a big stalagmite mass that was, I think, probably naturally flat on top. And during one of my first trips into Petroglyph Cave, which would have been in 1971. I found, I mean, it was sitting right on top of that big mass. It was probably, I don't know, 5, 6 feet up from where you would stand. Clearly, kind of a raised, round area at the top of a stalagmite. A brocadere skull, the whole thing with the antlers.
Wow.
And on a not too much later subsequent trip, it was gone. Someone took it. Some other human came in and just decided, oh, I'm going to take that home. Now, so I never really properly documented it, but it was absolutely there.
Was
But
it old?
oh yeah, it was old. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
I
Yeah.
I, I would say I was in that cave on the second trip ever in modern times. That was me.
Oh,
The first trip would have been Ford Young back in like 1968 when he was still young enough to go caving. And I
wow.
found out about that cave from him because he was also a pilot and he had sent, when I was still living in Seattle, he had sent me photographs of the sinkhole entrance from the air. So I didn't actually get into that cave until 71, but that would have been the second trip. And I hired the same bush guide that Ford had used to actually find the cave. And
Wow.
so yeah, I'm quite sure that no one other than Ford and this bush guide had been in there before me.
Wow.
But not too long after that, then other people started
Yeah.
coming along behind, as happens.
Taking your deer skull.
Yeah, I was kind of ticked off about that.
Yeah, I'd be ticked off too. But yeah. Well, I don't know, Scott. I I mean, we look
It's
for it, but we just
yeah.
don't. Yeah, I don't know
And
how to make.
I'll just add, you mentioned the presence of agriculture, and maybe that was a shift. But as you'll recall, in the Southwest, when we start getting the agricultural rituals, and they proliferate, immensely at a certain period, but the hunting rituals don't stop. They continue alongside, and you have thousands of arrows and dozens of bows and things like that. So it both intensify simultaneously, and neither one ever. It's just the agricultural is the addition.
Yeah, but yeah, we don't. No, we have grinding stones. We have a lot of that kind of stuff, but not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
yeah,
certainly in the iconography on ceramics, you see there. I mean, there is a whole constellation of the deer god and hunting god, who is the old god. You know, he's kind of a polymorph, but he has deer attributes in this set of vessels, codex style vessels. He has deer attributes, and he carries a big conch shell. And he emerges from a snake, and it is a male who is conjuring this snake with a woven tube made out of some kind of grass or something like that. And out of this tube emerges the snake, and out of the open maw of the snake is this old god with a blackened face and deer antlers carrying a conch shell. And we have good reason to think that he's the antecedent of Wuxip, the god of the hunt. And so there's plenty of evidence there from the
Yeah.
iconography.
yeah,
These are late classic vessels,
yeah,
but certainly, right on through, there would have been hunting rituals. We just don't find in caves.
And in the Southwest, the evidence, particularly for the Grand Canyon, the split twig figurines, which is the one thing that we can't say might be war offerings as well as hunting. And the best hypothesis is that these are offerings to the underworld gamekeeper figure. That is, which is also present in Mesoamerica. In fact, we find very good ethnography for it. Holly, I'm sure I showed you that one bull from the Galaz Mimbre site where it has this large figure. He has fire on his head. He's carrying the rabbit throwing sticks in both hands, like boomerangs, and then he has three small dependents carrying his enormous phallus, ahead of him.
Mm.
And I do think
I
that's,
haven't seen
you know,
that
I had never showed you that. I'm sure I showed you
one.
that.
Oh,
Well, I'll send it. I'll send it to you.
you
But
send a photo.
it's quite a bull. It's been repatriated, and I think it's getting reburied very
Oh,
soon. But there's lots
oh,
of images of it. But I think that's an image of the Underworld Gamekeeper. I talked to Jim about, I think there's one mention in one of his papers of the Underworld Gamekeeper having this enormous phallus in it. But he's got the fire in his head too, so it's kind of like the old fire god, type figure too.
that's trippy.
Hey,
I'll
Jim,
send you that.
Well, I'll keep looking for a hunting ritual.
Yeah, I mean, let me know when you find it because it's again though in the Southwest we have a variety of complexes, appearing around the same time period, all clearly related to hunting, but they're all distinct,
Yeah,
and the offering pattern is intensive. So it could be that there's something that just didn't survive in the archaeological record. They could have left an organ or something like that.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
But yeah,
I,
I feel like there should be some signal though.
I wouldn't say that it would be necessarily found in caves because that wouldn't be where they would go to maybe interact with a hunting god. It would seem to be some altar out in nature, outdoors, not in an interior cave. But Scott,
That could be, but everything else in caves, is almost analogous between both regions. So
Scott, do you do programs like for Crow Canyon or anywhere in the Southwest?
I'm the state parks archaeologist for New Mexico at the present time.
Okay.
So I mean I sometimes do lectures like this, yes, but I don't work at Crook Canyon.
Oh no. Okay.
He has a great dissertation.
Yeah, I'd be interested
Thank you, Holly.
get in touch with you. I'm looking for people
Yeah.
here. And the Aztlander covers the Southwest. We cover the
Yeah, I've been following it for a long, long time.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I don't see too many other questions. Ryan asks, is there evidence of a ritual at 1100 BC?
I just answered him.
Oh, okay.
We have lots of charcoal and some crappy sherds.
Oh, I see. Crappy sherds.
Yeah, very crappy sherds.
Oh.
Mostly non-diagnostics, but some of them looked very Cuneill-like. So I'm assuming that they're the type variety for that period would be called Cuneill. I was pretty sure they're Cuneill. So I was exporting them to the States, and I was driving, and I had to stop at the border at Texas, and the border guy took my box. I had a little box of stuff, including all the shirts, and they opened my box while I couldn't see. He took it into another room, and he gave it back. And when I got home, my early classic shirts were not there.
Oh.
So I don't know whether they didn't get into the box or he forgot to put them back in if he was looking through. I don't know. But they disappeared in transit.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a bummer. But I had pictures of them. Yeah.
And earlier, when you were talking, Barb, especially about catfish, Alan Christensen said the reborn hero twins began as catfish people.
That too.
They tie in.
Yeah, the catfish thing. Yeah, I love the netting, the nets, the net weights. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they were just utilitarian sherds that had been carved into these little sort of loosely hourglass shaped net sinkers with holes punched into them.
Yeah, I messaged an image of that bowl, Holly.
Wow, that's really something.
I think it may be the Underworld gamekeeper figure.
Why does he have such a large phallus?
That's a good question, but it does sometimes that is associated with that figure.
Interesting.
Of course, that's not the thing that gets recorded in a lot of the older ethnographies at all. So
that is a crazy bowl. Too bad it's going away, but at least you got a picture of it. There you go.
yeah, it's well documented and it has solid provenience. It's not a fake like a lot of the other.
Yeah.
Is it possible to share it right now?
It's in the.
I posted the image as a message.
I think you can download it.
Is it in the chat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you click the little blue button, Barbara, you can download it.
Let me see if I had to scroll to where it would be. Oh, okay, I see where it is. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and click the save as.
And then
Yeah, I don't know if you can't save it, message me. I'll put my email in
right
there.
now it looks as though my computer's going to let me save it. So I'm just going to put it on my desktop and then I'll find some other place to put it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very
There's my email if you want to know more about the provenience.
Archeospelio@gmail.com. Thank you.
and what could I put as a title for that image? What is that, a god? Is it a hunting god, or what is it?
I mean, there's no Southwest ethnography that fits it well, but that's my hypothesis. I would just mark it as. I can give you the MIMPID number for it. Here, hold on.
Well,
Well, Barbara, I sent you notes earlier. You probably didn't see them.
Uh, Notes, you mean tonight?
I've been sending you little questions and stuff.
Oh, you sent them earlier today?
Yeah, they're on the chat.
Oh,
Anyway,
oh, okay. Let me see. I'll scroll up there and see if I can find them. Um,
And Barb, was that canoe where is that the one you used when you recorded the song in the cave?
yes, yes, it certainly was. Yeah, that made it possible to go into that place with a guitar and a tape recorder and two people. Uh,
And
that
who was
was quite
oh, I forget who was with you.
Carol Joe Russian, and it was in the Blue Hole. I mean, the Blue Hole itself, downstream, down the road from Belmopan, is a well-known place, but it's actually where the main stream in St. Herman's Cave resurges to the surface, but then the stream immediately dives underground again. But to get into that next chamber, you've got to be willing to swim into the dark zone in deep water, and at that point, the water becomes like 40 or 50 feet deep, and it's a siphon. But and to take the canoe in there, there was a fairly low ceiling, and we were in the canoe, but we had to basically lie down flat, almost below the gunnels, and pull ourselves along the ceiling to get into the chamber. Then once we were in there, you're in deep water with a very high ceiling, probably 40, 50 feet, and it had perfect resonance or perfect echo capabilities such that you could sing three notes of a chord like ah, and then sit back and listen to the whole chord for 30 seconds.
Wow.
wow.
And so, I mean, it's just an astonishing place. And so we thought, okay, need to come back in here and record.
What'd you
Actually,
see?
I had found it with inner tubes before I took the canoe in there, so that's how I knew about it. And then came back in with the canoe with the tape recorder and the guitar. And that recording is available. I can share it around.
Yeah, I'd like to share it again. It's been more than a year, I think.
I mean, it's
That'd be
on the National
great.
Speleological Society Cave Ballad Salon website. If you could, I mean, you could just do a Google search to National Speleological Society Cave Ballad Salon, and the song is called "The Encounter of the Long Count Keeper,"
Yeah.
and it was recorded multiple times, but that was the most interesting recording in that chamber. And but I'm happy if someone wants to just ask me. Jim has my email address. I'll be happy to share a link to it.
Well, you could share it with me again. I'd like to publish it
Yeah,
again.
I mean, I can do that. Right now, it's a little bit tricky for me to go and fetch it. I do it right now, but that's, I'm going to have to be, kind of away from this discussion to go get it. But I can share it with you, and
But
then you can share it around.
just let it be known that Barbara's signed up for her third Zoom with me next year, and actually less than a year from now, in September.
What am I going to talk about? Did I say?
No, you said you'd decide.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
I have Barb in September. Question mark.
September next year.
Oh,
Next year.
Yay.
All right.
I could work you in sooner than that, but
No, that's fine.
thinking I would
That's
have
fine.
one person a year next year, like take a little break and not
Hmm.
emailing people so many times a month. But already I've got two planned a month through May. So if
Yeah, well,
you wanted to be sooner than September, you're welcome.
no. I'm fine with that. Really. No, there's a lot of other wonderful people presenting, and it's just superb to see how popular the IMS and Aztlander have become, and so more power to you.
Alrighty. Well, with that, I don't see any more questions. Scott, is your hand up from earlier, or did you
Oh
have?
yeah, sorry. I guess you have to put it down here.
And Holly, I'm looking for. You said you sent me some notes, and I'm
I
scrolling up.
did. I said let's do I said let's do an article on cave pilgrimage.
Yes, let's do. But I'm trying to find it. I mean, do you have my current email address? That might be the
That's
best
what
way.
I wasn't sure if I have it. What is it?
It's KANBOLAY 11 @gmail.com, and just pop me a one-liner, and then we'll be in touch about it.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
No,
Cool.
we should do that.
I know we need to do that.
We've got
And I wanted to know.
two sides of the story
Oh
between us.
yeah, it'd be great. So I also wanted to know if your book came out.
No, I mean my book in Not Too Niche. No, I got so distracted. I actually I got hung up on one particular issue that I couldn't resolve for the longest time, a year and a half or so, beating my head on this dating problem. And I finally solved it, and I published it in the Aztlander magazine. It was, I think, November of last year. And the article is titled "A Fire Carrying Ritual in Natunich," with the new dates. And so I finally figured it out, and a whole lot of other stuff came together, and it turns out to be a very important nexus of ritual and political activity in Nathunich. Very important, in which they're documenting an attack.
Oh.
And so that article is now out on Aztlander. I think it's November of last year. But with that in hand, now I can go ahead and finish the book. But I've been very distracted by other stuff that I'm working on in the meantime. I mean, I've just been incredibly busy right now. I'm I'm immersed in a project with Petra Biro, my Hungarian collaborator and friend, on Copan Stele E, which anyone who's an epigrapher knows that that's one of the most difficult monuments in the entire corpus, and we're actually making some headway. So I'm kind of immersed in the pursuit of it. But no, the book is definitely it's on my table to finish, and I do want to get it done. It's on my short list. It's on my short list.
All right. Well, I'm going to get on your short list.
Yeah. Well, okay. Just send me an email, and then we'll correspond about that.
Oh yeah, we're going to do it. Yeah, I'm excited. Okay.
I mean, is there anything I'm just scrolling through?
I've been intending to email you since your talk last time when you talked about pilgrimage at Nocturne, and the intention's been there, but I've been busier than a one-legged man at an ass-kicking contest. So
yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, and I remember when you were talking about the evidence for pilgrimage at Las Cuevas. I'm thinking that the actual physical layout is very similar to Natunich. There's that monstrous entrance chamber, which I don't know if anyone's actually come forward and said how many people it could hold, but certainly hundreds and hundreds easily.
Yeah.
And then that balcony, which in part was natural, and then part of which they had constructed, such that someone an orator could be up on top, speaking, and be able to fill that whole chamber with the voice. And then the cave itself had been sealed off, or had pinched down, fairly small anyway. And then there were periods during which they sealed it off with broken stalactites. So there are definitely some similarities there.
That's very interesting.
And I'd say primarily, you want to name one thing they did at Natunich, I would say pilgrimage was it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we definitely, we got it going here. Yeah. This would be a great article. Yeah. I'm very excited. All right. Okay. I have got to scoot.
All right. Just thought I'd show you that point I found in the cave.
That's called the leaf. That's a leaf point.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
It's very beautiful. Yeah.
No, that another one like that was found in Cave's Branch Cave.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got a bunch of them. There's some in Chimpeach. I have a bunch actually. Some out by San Antonio Village. There's one in Cana, I think. Yeah.
Cool. My friends had bought the land behind Sokots, where now they discovered the Sokots workshop, lithic workshop. But we, back in those times, in the 70s, we actually built their little thatch roof hut on top of one of these mounds of debris. But I could not go out, not that I was looking for them, but if I dug a little hole to plant a banana plant, I would find things like this. It was just unbelievable. But all right, I'll let you finish emailing whoever, and then we'll shut it down.
Actually, I'll stick this in there because I'm looking at that section of chat where Joey had asked if he found evidence of human sacrifices, whether human sacrifices were done willingly or not. And this is something Holly and I have talked about a bit too, because we do have a lot of skeletal remains in caves. Many caves have a few, and some caves have quite a few. And in my feeling about it is that they're not interments. They're not family members being taken into caves and laid out. That these are very likely captive sacrifices. I think probably most or all would qualify as captive sacrifices. And I would say in that case, they're probably not in the least bit willing. They may have been marched in there alive just to make it easier to get them in there, but I doubt that any of them went willingly. But it may be that there were obligations upon them once they've been taken captive. I mean, the myth about this for the Aztecs is that once they've been taken captive, then it would be a dishonor for them to get away and go back home. That would be much more honorable for them to allow themselves to be sacrificed. And I honestly don't know whether that was really true or not. I would think I would think they'd want to get away and would have done so anytime they could.
What, like a butterfly death, or what do they call it? Where it was actually an honor. And even I've heard that some of the Maya families who would offer their young kids to be sacrificed in a ritual for the whole village, it was an honor for them.
That is a story kind of on its own, but we're talking about kids. I mean, kids who were not able to make autonomous decisions for themselves and probably really had no options for getting away. And then you have to ask, well, which families are willing to give up their children for this kind of thing? And how do we know whether these were willing offerings from members of one's own community or whether these were, in fact, raids on enemy communities where women and children were dragged back home for sacrifice? I think that certainly happened sometimes.
Yeah.
And as far as how much of it might have been willing, I don't know what evidence we have for it. If there's anything in the ethnohistorical literature, I'm not saying it isn't there. I can't pull it up out of my head right now.
I'm thinking Francis Berman may have published something on that.
And concerning whom and where?
Concerning where the sacrificial victims came from. So you had people who had been sold into slavery or had gambling debt and were enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
So the merchants would offer them sometimes.
So these are captives, or they're in some liminal status other than recognized members of the community.
Right.
And
absolutely.
So disposable. Yeah.
Yep. And that, with the babies, who knows? Maybe that's something you do with an unwanted baby.
Yeah. Although you'd think, though, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we had infants as well in Petroglyph Cave, quite a few, at least a dozen or so. Little tiny ones, I mean, less than a year old. Yeah. And cemented to the floor, very hard to recover enough material to even sex them. But you could see enough to determine that these are infants.
Yeah.
And placed into pools. The circumstances were that they were placed into pools.
And all of ours were placed in pools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming this would have been, these were offerings to Chalk. Chalk liked little babies.
Yeah.
But the question about where they came from, where are their mothers? What do their mothers have to say about this? I don't know. I would think to do this within one's own village would have enormous, terrible repercussions. But I have no idea what the rules were.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, it was so great to see everybody. Barbara, so nice to see you.
Yeah, same here, Holly. Always nice to catch up with you and all your wonderful stuff. All your wonderful work.
But I just, I love talking caves with you.
Well, we
It's
have between
great.
us, we've got hundreds and hundreds of them.
Exactly. Yep. No, it's really good. So this was a very fun night. And thank you everybody for staying. You guys are all hardcore out there. All right. Okay. I'm gonna click out.
All right.
Ciao, Buzz.
All right.
Good night.
Bye, you guys.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Barb. And thanks for watching this Aztlander video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To subscribe to free monthly issues of the Aztlander magazine in the Americas, contact your host, Jim Reed, at jimreedmaya@gmail.com. Thanks again, and enjoy a great life.